plants now. And I want this to be kind of a mix between gardening and wild plants. And this will lead into other talks in the future. So we'll call this Tim Talk a plant talk / gardening talk. One of the best ways we can ever learn to communicate with nature on a deeper level is to become gardeners. I had the luck when I was a kid of being introduced to gardening because I became the person who grew the garden for my family to eat food from. So from about 10 through my teenage years, I had a garden. We had a great backyard, about a quarter of an acre, in a town called Sunnyvale, which is now the Silicon Valley. Back then it was orchards and wildland, and that's such a pain to even think about it. But I had a quarter of an acre, and I had a wonderful garden I grew, and I self-taught. But as I grew up, I was in that time in the 60s and the early 70s when the beauty of back to the land living and gardening came back around is a very important thing. And so lots of great knowledge was coming out. So I started to study about gardening also. And I also remember I read that in World War II, when food was short in our country, instead of having lawns, everybody had what were called victory gardens to win the war, and everybody grew their own gardens and fed their families and donated food to the service and so forth of the cause of fighting the war in World War II. Can you imagine going through a neighborhood, instead of seeing hundreds of green lawns, seeing hundreds of gardens full of food and flowers and berries? You imagine that? I mean, that is so, what a beautiful thing to see, but a beautiful thought. You imagine the abundance of food just in one neighborhood. If both sides of the street did it, it would be endless how much food there'd be. And then people would come out and they would work in their gardens. They'd actually meet their neighbors. I'm always amazed at how little people know about their neighbors or even know them, sometimes right next door. You'd talk to them, you'd share ideas. Things would blossom from that. Friendships would develop. That's one way we make the world better. So creating a garden, putting it in your front yard, if you don't have room, your back, wherever, learning to garden is a huge thing. Plant communication, something we all want. What better way than taking a seed, giving it a blessing, plant it, water it, continue to give it blessings, and I'll talk more about that later. Wish it the best, watch it grow, take it and plant it in the garden, water it, watch it grow. You nurture it, you protect it from insects attacks, you protect it from too much sun or too little sun, you give it water, etc. You clip it when it needs clipped. It grows up. You're looking at it every day. You're having a personal relationship with that plant. Personal relationship. You don't even know it. It's communicating to you endlessly. This is something I want you to get, especially when you're growing a plant, but it always happens with any plants, wild or non-wild. It's communicating with you. In fact, sometimes that plant's probably getting so frustrated that you're not communicating back. But one way you're communicating back very strongly is showing love and care and tenderness towards the plant and offering it protection. That's an incredible communication. But you can always go deeper. I want you to know that. The opportunity to go deeper is always there waiting for you. So you grow this plant, and then eventually the plant fruits. Say it's a tomato plant or a cucumber plant or an eggplant or a berry plant, and you get to enjoy the fruit. You eat the plant. The plant's still living. You pick it, you eat it, and the plant literally becomes you. You absorb it into your system. It gives you nutrients to live. You become the plant. You become the tomato. You become the cucumber. You become the eggplant. Think about that for a minute. Just stop for a minute and think. What a remarkable thing that is that I just talked about. You start a plant from seed. You grow it. You nurture it. You protect it. Then you eat it. That is a miracle. It gives you life, and you give it purpose, joy, pleasure, the art of living as a plant at its best. It's a mutual beneficial relationship that is on all levels, from the basic physical to the spiritual and everything in between. And then eventually, that plant wraps up its life, and you either pick it and eat the whole plant if it's something like lettuce or something, or you pick it and you put it in your compost pile, and you create life by making dirt compost. And the next year, you put that incredible dirt that's full of worms and other animals that are in your garden, and you start the whole process over again. And imagine that tenfold, 20-fold, 100-fold, 500-fold, a garden full of plants, all yours to care for. That is a miracle. Stop and think. Take in that thought. It's a miracle. It's a miraculous thing. The art of gardening. Now, gardening can be a very ugly thing. You know, commercial gardening, people will spray poisons on their plants. This is the dark side of gardening. The poisons kill countless animals. They put poison into the dirt. It kills countless animals. Birds are killed if they come into the garden. Squirrels are killed if they come into the garden. The garden's such a monoculture, just one plant with nothing else allowed to live. It becomes almost a living/dead environment. It's almost like a zombie environment, when you have nothing but one plant and nothing else. So I could go into that forever. We all know it's a big problem in our country. Why do we try to buy organic versus non-organic? But even organic can be not so good in the long run if there's not a consideration for the quality of the plant's life and the beings that live around it. So there is that dark side of gardening, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you growing a garden for yourself, your family, and your community, and how you learn to speak to it. And then there's a whole nother level of how plants work, which I want to talk about in a minute, called our elementals or earth spiritual beings, things like that. We kind of hear about, which I want to get into later also. But I just wanted to mention this. And then you can grow an ornamental garden. Think about this. Why does any human pay a gardener to plant an ornamental garden that creates beauty around their home or their living space? It's a way we say we love plants. They bring us peace. They bring us calmness. They bring us comfort. They show us love in many different forms. So we surround ourselves with plants, often not even knowing why we do it. But there's all these underlying benefits that happen. So that must mean there's some part of us that knows, right? It may not be in this thing, the brain, but there's some part of us that knows the importance of that. So ornamental gardens, create diversity in your garden. Don't over clean it. Don't over trim it. You want it to be beautiful and neat and clean, yes, but not so much that it loses its medicine, I guess I would say. It loses its spiritual side. You want a garden to be a little semi-wild, have a little wildness. You also, and something to really think about, is you want to have a wild section of your garden where plants just to get to express themselves. And that's more for the earth spirits, which I'll talk about again later. But you want that. Very important. A little wildness within the garden. Okay? So, start a garden. Even if it's in pots on a deck in a condo, start a garden. Nurture the plants. Grow them. And you will see the benefits. And make this something you do your whole life. I can think of very few more noble things to do than grow food and then have the gift of eating it. All right? So, start a garden. The next subject I want to talk about is the next level of gardening, working with what we call the elemental beings that live in gardens and live on and around the earth. It's a huge subject. And I know a lot of people, even dedicated earth lovers, lifetime earth lovers, just struggle with this. Because we as human beings, if we don't physically see something with our eyes, we usually don't think of it as real. But even sometimes looking with our eyes, we're not really sure what we're seeing. It's always left up to interpretation. And so that can even be a little bit perplexing and mystifying. But I will tell you now, as Tim Corcoran, leader of Headwaters Outdoor School, my lifelong experience, I give you my word, I am not lying about this. This is the absolute truth, as I know it. There is a whole level of beings. For lack of a better word, they're called the elemental beings that people have talked about for years. One of the biggest teachers of that was Rudolf Steiner, the founder of the Waldorf school system, but so many others. You've heard of Findhorn, the beautiful, famous garden in Scotland. They worked with the elementals, and I could go on, and we do in our land endlessly. So think about it this way. What do plants need to live? They need soil. The soil has to be alive so the roots can go down through it, pick up all the nutrients from the water coming through. What else do plants need? Water. What else do plants need? Space. What else do plants need? The sun, photosynthesis. These things are vital to all plant growth. There's one other element, why they're called elementals, that we just have trouble understanding as human beings. And that's partially a good thing, which I'll explain. These elemental beings, or I like to call them earth spirits, they nurture the plants on a spiritual level. Stop for a second. Are plants not living beings? Do you really honestly believe that plants don't have feelings? Do you really honestly believe that plants don't enjoy their life? Do you really honestly believe that plants can't or don't express love in their own unique way? Can you really honestly believe that plants don't see beauty? Can you really honestly believe that plants don't enjoy the gift of life and living? If you can't get that, then you're wrong. They do. And it's there waiting for you to learn this and take you deeper if you want. Because I'm telling you, it's true. And this other level of beings, they're called elementals or earth spirits. They're the caretakers of the plants. They're the ones that help them to grow, give them spiritual energy, fiddle around with them, and protect them as much as they can. These beings are not generally physical. They live on what I would call another plane of existence. Like I'm talking to you right now on one level of existence. You can see there's the tree. It's physical. This piece of wood I'm sitting on, it's physical. I'm breathing physical air. I'm by a creek. You can probably even hear it right now. That's physical. But if I just took a step a little deeper, I would still be on the same place, but I wouldn't be visible. It'd be like another layer of life. And I believe there's many layers of life. Just as there's many layers of life in the forest. Just like there's many layers of life in the creek and layers of life in a garden. There's layers of life in our bodies. So you got to make this leap. Now, why would it be so hard? You answer your cell phone every day. You can't see that coming into you. How does it get there? We accept that as something that we don't see physically, but we know it's real. We could go on and on. Love, I've talked about before. We all agree love exists. It's an incredibly powerful thing. We all want it. We all need it. We can't see it physically. You can see it in somebody's smile or that kind of thing. You know what I'm saying here? So there's many ways to look at this. So why couldn't there be something more than just us? Isn't that a little bit preposterous to think that all there is this physical world and us humans? Really? Isn't that almost a little narcissistic? I think it is. There is more. And the exciting part about that, if we want to access more of all that there is, then we can. It's there for us to explore, to figure it out, to find the keys. And if we don't want to, we can just enjoy our life in the physical world, knowing there's so much more, and just have a great peace knowing that. Or we don't have to know it at all and just live our lives, and that's fine too. The beauty of this, there's no right or wrong with any of this. But if you want to go deeper, the elemental beings are there. Now, things like Walt Disney, they've made movies about fairies, and you've seen a lot of these funny kind of things like that where it's kind of been made fun of over the years. But yes, there are beings like that. There are there are thousands of what I would call species of beings. Some care for the water, some care for the flowers, some care for the trees, some care for certain types of landscapes, certain individual trees. One place you'll always learn a lot about elementals is in a garden. When you work personally with plants, they will sometimes show themselves, and they will begin to like you and be more willing to show themselves as they feel safer around you. I've talked to elementals before many times. The word I get is very simply, humans are not overall liked by elementals. See, these are very simple beings. They have a job to do, care for plants. They're not necessarily brain surgeons. They don't have incredible brains or all these kind of huge college education or all these things. They got a job to do, and they do it well. They care for plants, and they protect them. And we humans have screwed our plants up a lot. What do you think it does to elementals when we take monstrous tractors and big chainsaws and go into an old growth forest and hack it down to nothing? What is it like when a tractor runs across the ground and destroys everything living? I mean, think about it. This affects so many other beings. So humans don't have a great rap in this particular part of the world, the elemental world. So the way it's come to me through communication is when we're peaceful in nature, when we're loving, when we're open, often they'll show themselves to us. We'll see a flicker of light in a tree, a movement. We'll have, more often than not, it won't be something we see. We'll feel that we're being watched or that there's a presence there with us. We'll have sometimes just have an all-knowingness. You could never prove it, and why would you need to anyway? But just a knowingness that you're not alone, that there's many beings living around the ground where you are. And as you develop this skill on through time, on and on through time, you may see or experience more elementals. For me, sometimes people ask me, what's it like when you're in the woods? And I know people don't believe this, but it's true. I'm never really alone. There's elementals everywhere. I started my life relationship with them when I was a kid. And that's something I want to say. As a kid, you don't have all the dogma and the scientific knowledge and so forth that comes into our heads as we get older that tells us none of that's true. As a kid, you're completely open to the world you live in. So a lot of kids actually have friendships with elementals. They see them and they feel them all the time. But they talk about it with their parents and family a little here and there, but they don't think of it as anything any stranger than seeing a plant or seeing a raccoon or a deer in the woods or something. It's just normal to them. So they don't make a big deal out of it. But I've worked with kids my whole life, and I know this to be true. Somewhere around the age of 9 years old, we move from this magical way of seeing the world, which is so precious as kids, to the logical brain. Now, if we're lucky, like I was, having mentors who taught me about nature and believed that anything was possible. Here's a saying I love, a schematic saying. There are no limits. Anything is possible. That's how I approach the world. Anything's possible. Just because I don't know it, just because I haven't personally experienced it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So think about that one. So kids, somewhere around the age of 9, we go into the logical brain world. And if we're not ushered into that world and protected to some extent to keep the magical way of thinking that we had before, we let it go. Because we have to learn to live in that logical brain world, which means we have to get along and go to school and get jobs and so forth, right? So we start to let the magical world go. We get into the logical world and we forget it. And when we forget it, we're not open to it, and it doesn't show up. So the key is, one of the major keys is, let kids be in nature as much as they can. Don't give them every stupid toy from Toys R Us that you could ever find, particularly the computers. Keep them away from them. Let them play in the dirt. Let them eat the bugs. Let them play in the water. Let them climb the trees. Let them make toys and things out of things they find in nature. And they will build their relationship up very deeply and hopefully not lose it when they move into that logical world. And when they move into that logical world, help them to still go to nature, be free and open in nature and natural and in the moment, not always a purpose, and still use the logical brain too. You can have both. In fact, to live in the logical world, have this incredible brain work logically and intellectually, and then also have the spiritual part of the world where we're connected to all the things we can see and not see in a deeper sense. That's what we all want. That's the gift we dream of. That's what we look at other people we think that have it, and we dream it for ourselves. It's there, guys. It's there. Now, if you get into your later years in life, whether it's 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and you've lost it all and you're hearing me give this talk, how do you get it back? Gardening is one. The other is just to simply go spend time in nature. Sit by a creek like I'm doing and just observe it. When you're observing, open your heart. Imagine your heart opening up and just taking in all that there is. Not trying to figure it out with your logical brain. Take the logical brain, shut it down, and just enjoy being. Look at the details of all the different plants and the water and the animals, the shapes, the colors. Start to notice if anything, if you get a feeling or an all-knowingness, or if you see something that looks a little different. Maybe a shape in the bark of a tree, maybe in a ripple of the water, it'll speak to you through the sound of the rippling. Or maybe you'll see something from a bug falls in the water, or a leaf and it makes a ripple, or a shape on the ground, or the way a face in a rock, or a shape in a rock. You know, often I find heart rocks all the time. They just jump out at me. That's just reminding me that I'm a loving being, and when I'm at my best as a human, I come from love. And that it reminds me also that I'm not the only one that has a loving side and that comes from love, and that when I come from love, I'm the best I can be. This tree, this plant, this water, this rock, this insect, this animal here, all of them, the birds, the bees, all of them have a loving side. Why would that just be exclusively for humans? That would be insane. Is it love expressed and shown differently from different beings? Of course it is. Part of the fun of being a human is learning how to see it in everything and feel it in everything and decipher it. It's the journey of searching out a deeper life in nature and deeper meaning in nature. It's the joy of the journey. It's not the destination. It's always about the journey. Think about this alone. What is beauty? Why do you see one thing as beautiful and another not? What is beauty? And when you see beauty, how does it speak to you? How does it feel in your body? Where does it go in your body? What does it do to your brain when you see beauty? Often in nature, when you look at something and beauty is reflected back, at the same time, an elemental, an earth spirit is there as a part of it. And they're looking back at you. And when you're at your best, they're happy. And they feel good, and then they often show themselves more. So the more peaceful, quiet, quality time, being and deeply observing. Another great way is to sit by a plant or a tree or some water and let them ask them. Just ask them, just like I'm talking to you, or through your inside of yourself, ask them to give you a story or a poem about their life. And start to write. You'd be amazed at what you'll come up with. You'll be blown away. So I want you to think about that. And another incredible way is to create some art. Get up some watercolors out, or some colored pens, or a pencil, and ask a tree to show you the essence of itself, or a plant, or some water, or something like that, and draw it. It can be, if you're really the kind of an artist where you like detail, you can draw it exactly like if it was a photograph. Or you can get very expressive and draw it more like a Monet painting. It doesn't matter. It's whatever you do. It'll be from the heart of the plant or the water or the tree, and it'll be from your heart, and the connection will be made between the two. When you have gardens, I mentioned this earlier, Create wild spaces in the garden. Earth elementals beings love wild spaces. Earth spirits love wild spaces. They don't want it too neatly controlled. There has to be a wildness to it. That's very important. Just going out and just caring about the world you live in nature. Just going out, walking, swimming, climbing, and just having the caretaker feeling of wanting everything to be okay, of deeply wanting everything to be okay. That energy is picked up by every living thing in nature. And immediately, it's like nature grabs your heart and just wraps its heart and arms around you, and there's a fusion that takes place. What I'm trying to tell you guys, it's so simple. There's also this incredible thing that happens. We're all individuals. We all have unique ways we express ourselves, unique ways to us. Find those unique ways and utilize them. It might be that you dance in the woods. It might be that you climb a tree. It might be that you crawl through the woods. It might be that you sit in water and just disappear and become the water. It might be that you camo up and sit by a tree and become the tree. That's an incredible thing to do. The point here is to engage with your heart open. And if you want to learn to see elementals, be patient. It's going to take time because they don't trust us humans. But ask them to show up. Be open for them to show up. Be patient for them to show up. And then just enjoy nature and see what happens. Write about it. Draw pictures about it. Observe details deeply. And have lots of fun engaging. And, well, in the end, whether you know it or not, on an eye or an intellectual level, you are with the earth spirits. They're with you. And that's kind of a neat way to end this talk is, think about it. You walk through the woods, you playtime in a garden, you're never alone. You know you've got the raccoons and the deer and the mountain lions and the trees and the plants out there. They're all living things sharing the journey with you. You've also got the elementals. They're right there, always with you. And sometimes, there's a great saying from an old Grateful Dead song. Sometimes, if you look right, you just might see the light. Sometimes, if you look right, you just might see the light. Think about it. Practice looking differently, with the heart open, with a true, deep love and respect. And you'll see something. It'll be there for you. Ho.